Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Jason Brown, my T-Nation writer for the same sort of like time frame. That's, kind of how we go back and how we know each other. We got to hang out at the Real Coaches Summit last year. I'm just coming off of this one. And we will both be appearing at Canfit Pro's Global Conference this summer in August. So I look forward to seeing you again. Meanwhile, you've been doing incredible stuff. So you've got a master's in exercise science. You're working on your PhD, and you're a CSCS. You're an author of a book. Your YouTube has been crushing. Your social media has been growing. Matt, it's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, man. It's always a pleasure to connect with you, and I appreciate everything that you do for the industry as a whole. So thanks again for having me.
It's a good industry. It's worth doing good things for. So, and brought you on here to share you. So let's dive right in. Do you need to strength train more than 3 days a week?
Wow, we are diving right in. It's a great question. I think, there's a lot to unpack when we're considering what is optimal. And I think that at the end of the day, the individual dictates what is optimal for them, and we're all different, right? So I think that the common theme is that more, if you want to get leaner and you want to gain strength, then having more strength sessions and maybe biasing more strength and hypertrophy training is a good direction to go. However, I tend to lean more towards the other end of the spectrum, which isn't really the popular view. However, I think that most people are chronically stressed out. Most people are not doing the right things as far as their sleep, as far as their nutrition, as far as their stress management. And they're managing all these things. And it's kind of like you're adding more fuel onto this stress conundrum, if you will, where you're just putting on more stress onto an already stressed out system. So I think that the question really is where is someone at? Where are they looking to go? What is a low hanging fruit for the individual? And if I was to just kind of, throw a dart out there and hit 10 people, I think out of 10 people, you'd have 8 of them that are stressed out. That would report higher stress levels. And I think those are individuals that might be in a position to, again, get out of fight or flight, downregulate their nervous system, start learning how to do that, and then start thinking about what the long-term goal. If the long-term goal is body composition, then, driving adaptations as far as body comp isn't very hard to do. However, we have to have a foundation before we start doing anything. And I think that is the best place to start. And the way that we do that is we build a base of fitness through, a number of different things that we can do to strategically build someone up. But I think the short answer is strength training, what did you say? Is 3 days of strength training enough?
Do you need more than 3? And I know that's a broad question.
I don't think so for most people. I think there are always situations where you can argue 4, 5, maybe even 6 strength sessions. But I think if we're looking at kind of the law of averages here, I would say most people do not need more than 3 strength sessions to get incredible progress. And with that too, you have room for other things like aerobic conditioning. And again, getting people out of fight or flight and driving more of the parasympathetic nervous system as opposed to just high intensity fight or flight all the time.
This episode is brought to you by Renaissance Periodization and the RP Hypertrophy app. RP is the industry leader in muscle building, coaching, and education. This app is like having a coach in your pocket. It gives you everything you need, including training programs, form videos. It gives you all your sets, reps, and weights, so you just show up and follow the plan. It adjusts each week based off your progress. And the app was created by Dr. Mike Israetel, Nick Shaw, and the team at RP, who I've known for many years. And the entire team are incredible people who've always been supportive and generous with me, so I know their character and are easy to endorse. My library contains several RP books, and I've used RP training principles in my workouts and coaching with my clients for many years, long before the explosion in popularity of their YouTube channel, which is worth checking out. RP is the first sponsor I felt remotely comfortable endorsing after over 7 years of podcasting. And if hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to maximize your gains and take the guesswork out of your program. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. And I've also got a serious discount for you of up to $50 US. Go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATESRP, or go to the link below in the show notes. And that's rpstrength.com/coats. Use the code COATSRP.
How would you design a program for the, let's say, the busy working parent, or someone who fits a lot of that, who just wants to stay healthy?
I would design the program first and foremost based on what their availability is under worst case scenario. Worst case scenario. So people often, you probably see this a lot with people you work with, they often hold on to what worked for them in their 20s. And you and I both know, sitting here, 40 plus years of age, that what worked in our 20s is not the thing that's going to work in our 30s or 40s or beyond. So I think that having someone report what they can commit and under best case scenario, under worst case scenario, where everything in their life is off, their sleep is off, their kids are home from school sick, so on and so forth. What is the situation? If that situation only dictates 2 sessions per week, then we reverse engineer based on that. Versus, here's a 5-day-a-week program. Hopefully you can get it done. But if you can't get it done, then you're kind of fucked. Like, this is the program that I designed for you. And I see a lot of coaches do that. And I think that, the first question to ask is what can they commit to the training? And if it's 3 days a week, then we reverse engineer based on that. And what I tend to see is kind of a good fit for a lot of people out there, if they're in the 3 to 4 days per week, is we do some conditioning 1 or 2 days a week. We do some full body strength work 1 or 2 days a week. And again, it's super, super simple. It's not overly complex. It's not overly sexy, but it is incredibly powerful and effective when you do it the right way.
I mean, this is the stuff that the classic bodybuilders, the guys before Arnold, Steve Reeves being one of the more known ones, although that name may not be super familiar to everybody. And they were doing 2, 3 full body workouts a week. And these are physiques that if they were walking around today, they're not winning Olympia championships, but they're, the envy of, the average person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that, you look to someone's ability to recover from what we're giving them, because it's not because that there is anything kind of like intrinsically off with them. It's more or less just a product of their environment. They're in high stress, they're in fight or flight, they're stressed out with their job. They might have a poor situation in their home life. Maybe their marriage isn't great. I can go down a list of different things. And these are the things I tend to see. And I think that if we always start with lowest effective dose, it's much easier to titrate up as opposed to going down. If we start someone on 20 sets per body part, which it would be crazy to me, but people do it, then where do we go from there? We have to do 30 sets per body part per week. I mean, again, this is the kind of stuff that people are dealing with. And I think that most people are just in a mismatch as far as their training program. They're doing a training program that worked for them in their 20s. In your 20s, you don't have kids, you don't have responsibilities, you don't have, again, you're very resilient. You can recover from a lot. But that's not the case for most people. And I think as I've gotten older, the thing I've seen that wins is simplicity.
I like thinking about what you've said this way. It's a skill we learn when we're younger to brute force it. But people actually have to recognize, as you said it's a skill that's no longer working for them. So they actually have to unlearn that skill, because it manifests as an all or nothing thing. If I don't have the time to do it this one way, then I won't do it at all. And exactly. What I found with especially with my online group program is when I started building in more optionality, even framing it as optional, putting the word on there in some of the workouts, it improved the adherence, because the people who were, even if I was just saying to, hey, these, 4 or 5 workouts a week, some of them are optional, treat them as optional, telling them that, but not having the words literally on the program day, it still fostered sort of an on and off when they couldn't keep up with the full program. Like putting the word optional on it, they felt better and they would just think, okay, well, I'm going to be the person this round. I'll just do the 3 workouts because that's what I can fit in. And their adherence, generally speaking, across the program skyrocketed.
Yeah. And when you're designing a program that way, what the vital days are. So it's very easy to say like, okay, if you only have 3 days a week and you do a body part split, then you're missing a vital day, right? You're missing a leg day. You're missing a chest and back or whatever, however it's structured. You're missing a vital day, as opposed to you have a full body day where you're hitting your single leg, your hinge, your push, your pull, some abdominal work, maybe some direct arm work. You're hitting that on every time you hit a strength session, you're training the entire body. So if you miss a day, then it's a lot less rigid, as opposed to a body part split, which, tends to be, if you miss a session, then you've missed some big pieces there. And I think that, again, if I was just kind of like to look at the 10 people, meet 10 people on the street, 8 of them would be a good fit for a full body split. Whereas, you might have a couple of people that are training very specifically for physique or whatever, and maybe they have everything going for them that supports that training split. Again, law of averages, I think most people do need to do some things that are getting them out of fight or flight, are building their aerobic system. And of course, resistance training, we're never going to say that that's not important. It always is important. But if someone is doing resistance training after resistance training, and again, just doing high stress training over and over, then there is a cost of doing that. And that might not be in alignment with them, with where they're at in life.
And I saw you not too long ago post something about how Joel Jameson was one of your major influences in your career. And I know, having gone through Joel's course, for the coaches listening, and I'll have Joel on really soon as well. I'm going to record with him this week as long as scheduling works out. But his approach to program volume and design and the intensities, I think, is some of the best in the industry. So what do you do to get people who are, too much fight or flight? How do you approach it to get them less fight or flight, more parasympathetic?
Yeah. So you mentioned early on that the psychological aspect of potentially like rewiring and relearning, there are some walls that have to be broken down, because when you do lower intensity aerobic work, it doesn't feel particularly hard. And because of that, people often assume that it's not going to be particularly effective, which we know that's not the case. And there is a lot of adaptations, physiological adaptations to aerobic training take place in certain ranges. And there are certain markers that we need to have in place for that to go the way we want it to go. So there is some wall breaking that needs to take place. There is some education as far as what it does and how it is going to be beneficial. And I think everyone wants to know, what's in it for me, right? And this is funny with T Nation, is they're like, when you write an article, you got to think about like, what's in it for me? I know that was always like a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around, but I think with training, writing a program, it's the same thing, and people want to know what's in it for them. So if we're talking about someone's ability to live longer, to recover better, and then we even get deeper, we get into some more of the deeper physiological adaptations, like lactate threshold and being able to recover between their strength exercises and not have their strength exercises be as fatiguing as they would if their aerobic system was not as well trained. These are things that people can start making connections, and they can start doing it correctly. So we have to introduce them to some lower intensity training and explain to them why they're doing it, and how to do it, and what are the optimal things to perform that work. And then once they start seeing the results, and we can track some very easy data, like heart rate variability is a great tracker for that, and Joel has an incredible system for that. Resting heart rate is another one, and you can obviously do there are some very easy conditioning tests that you can do. But I think that the key element here is just more of the subjective, how do you feel? And they start feeling better, and people do start feeling better pretty quickly after kind of, again, getting them out of the state that they've been in, probably for a long period of time. Some people have been in this state for years. And once that starts happening, you just start seeing some of these markers go down just by circumstance of like, hey, now we're doing something that you have never done. It's incredibly beneficial because of A, B, and C. And this is going to allow you, really afford you the ability to get more from your strength training. So this stuff starts to work kind of in our favor. And if we can explain the why behind it and have people be compliant with it, then things start going in the right direction. So really just kind of the introduction of it, what it is, how it's going to benefit them, how to do it, obviously. And then, that in conjunction with some things that they want too, because I think at the end of the day, if you give someone just everything that they need as opposed to what they want, there's a fine balance between art and science with program design. And I don't feel like it should be all art or all science. There should be some melding of these two things. And when we do that, we give people some things that they do want to do. They might want some higher intensity training, and we can be strategic about that. But, knowing that the core of what we're having them doing is supporting their needs, their goals, and of course, where they're currently at within that stage of working with a coach.
Let's say you've got the person, the 8 out of 10 people that you're concerned about too much fight or flight. What do you like to do with that when it comes to the zone 2 low intensity cardio as a base? How much a week?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think really the first question is how much are they currently doing? If it's 0, then we can do anything, right? We could do 30 minutes and see a result from that. Now the question is, for how long are they going to get a result from that? And the short answer is, it always depends. It might be 4 weeks, might be 12 weeks, could be 52 weeks. So I think We kind of evaluate what is the lowest effective dose for them. And of course, again, being in alignment with their training schedule. And then from there, we can titrate, we can go up much higher. With zone 2, you can get away with a fair amount and not have it bleed into strength and hypertrophy gains. I've seen people do a fair amount of road work. Marathon runners I've worked with in the past that are doing just ridiculous amounts of road work, and not just the amount of road work that you or I could do, but for normal people, if they do 2 to 3 hours a week of zone 2 training, that's a fair amount. That's in essence 3 training sessions, right? So I like to see someone anywhere from 60 minutes to 3 hours, as high as 3 hours, but kind of the sweet spot would be 90 minutes to 2 hours for most people. Again, most people don't have 5 or 6 days a week to train. So it's just one of those things. We have to make some concessions. Then on the other end, if we're thinking about those 8 people, I would have a balance of some full body strength work and some aerobic conditioning. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you might have someone that is like on a timeline of like, hey, I want to look good in my bathing suit for this trip I'm going on. So we might bias more strength work for a certain period of time. And maybe we only do 1 aerobic session a week and we do 2 or 3 full body sessions per week, assuming that they have the wiring to support that. So assuming that their stress levels are in check and they're doing the right things outside of the gym. So, it's not a one size fits. We're just going to say, hey, do 2 hours of zone 2, do 2 full body strength sessions per week, and you're good to go. You can adjust that based on that individual profile.
Numerous times I've probably mentioned online how I like sitting on a recumbent bike. And I remember when I entered the industry and people would say, oh, that's useless, you're not getting anything out of it. But I disagree now. And often after a strength training session, because yes, there's the argument about, I certainly think the interference effect is a bit overrated for the average person. I'm not concerned with it. It's more about getting things done.
Well, it is totally.
Yeah. And then I'll sit on a recumbent bike for 20 to 30 minutes, but I bring a book, or sometimes I'll bring my little video game handheld thing, playing old Nintendo games, which is actually pretty cool. Time passes super fast. But sitting on the recumbent bike and reading and doing something, I find that relaxing. It's not overly stressful or taxing. And if I can do this 3 or 4 times after a workout session anyway, because again, the drive time to the gym, whatever, I'm thinking about getting one for my home, but I don't have it yet. Space is an issue. But there's 90 to 120 minutes a week. And I've noticed since I've done that, I feel better. I just simply feel better.
Yeah. I mean, I don't doubt that. I think that a small amount goes a long way, especially if you're doing 0. And then, I think the other thing too, Andrew, and I'm almost positive you see the same thing, but how underrated are steps, just daily steps? It's such an underrated tool that, again, people are not getting enough steps. They're just not getting enough daily movement. The TDE is just not where we like it to be. So I think that is such for me personally, one of the things, and I'm keeping track of this stuff through my Garmin watch. So I know my average of steps last year, so 2024, was like around 8,500. And this year I'm up to around 13,000. And I've seen a huge difference even with my nutrition. And last year I did a drastic cut to get leaner. This year I'm not needing the same level of reduction of calories to get the same results. So I think that that's another thing. And the question too is, if someone is overly deconditioned, can they go into zone 2 with steps? And the answer is, certainly yes. However, how long will it be the right fit for their zone 2? Probably not. They're doing it consistently, probably not for a super long period of time, but there is just so much that we can glean just from doing steps, daily steps on a consistent basis in conjunction with our resistance training.
The architecture of your life is huge here. This is something, so I think a lot of people in our space who have, the larger social media followings, who built a lot of different stuff, they tend to not do much in-person coach anymore. I'm still full-time in person on top of everything else. I know I'm a lunatic like that. So, but I notice that I'm on my feet all day, and that alone is going to be a high step count. And I think this is where coaches sometimes get into trouble, is the coaches who go out of coaching in full-time in person, they end up doing a lot of the program work online. You know this, you sit down, you write a book, you're building systems and all that. And this show's not just about coaches anymore, but there's a lot of coaches listening. If you don't realize that as you shift more and more into sedentary online space stuff, it takes away a lot of your physical activity and your step count. So one of the benefits, on top of the fact that I just like working in person and I find it's very stable for a career, is it just keeps my step count really high. And I
Yeah.
feel good that way. What have you noticed with you?
I wasn't tracking steps. I haven't done in person for, wow, almost 10 years, which is crazy to say out loud. But I sold my gym in 2016. So almost 10 years not doing in person. I wasn't tracking it back then. I'm very curious what it was. I bet. I mean, what are you on a daily? I mean, you're obviously well over 10K. You're probably 15, 20K a day.
I've never tracked. I actually
I wonder.
don't know, but yeah, if I'm training, God, I mean, I train 7 days a week. Not every day has as many sessions, but I mean, it's not unusual for me to have 6 to 9 hours of client sessions, and I'm on my feet 99% of that time. Not to mention that I go and do my own workout and then my own, zone 2 work and whatever. And in the summer in the nice weather, I actually want to get out and walk more. That's also something I'm committed to doing. So I would have to assume my step count will be way north of 10,000 steps.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, if I'm doing, 13, averaging 50,000, I think a lot of parents are probably higher than they think. I know that, a lot of them are tracking it, but, the main thing I've noticed is just, again, kind of the, trying to get leaner. For me, I try to get leaner. I mean, I'm like you, I'm in a cold climate most of the year. So it's nice to try to get leaner for the summer, and not having to do a drastic cut this year is what I've done in past years, doing a, pretty significant reduction in calories to get leaner. For me, I haven't had to do that yet this year. And, I would say even my average resting heart rate is lower. Now I couldn't relate it specifically to that, but some ways I could, because it's really the only major change. I'm doing very similar training I was last year. So I think that there's definitely some benefits there as far as reduction of stress. This is 2025 for me has been a more stressful year than normals, and I'm not seeing physiological effects of it because I think the daily step count has been significantly higher. We're talking again 5,000 steps. It's quite a bit. So
What are you doing to generate those extra steps consciously?
So I have to make time for it, really. I have to get in, early in the day, I have to get a walk in. I'm usually take my dog out in the morning. That's my first 2,000 steps. Usually in the afternoon, I'll get another, quick walk. You're talking 10 to 15 minutes in my driveway. My driveway is 700 steps from top to bottom. So every time I walk down my driveway, and it's 800 feet. So I walk down, I walk up, I get 700 steps. And actually I've got a pretty significant incline too, but about a 30-degree incline, coming up. So I get, I probably get into 110, 115 as far as heart rate. So I do that a few times a day. And then, anytime I'm doing any zone 2 cyclical work, for me, I do a lot of running, which is something I would never thought I'd be saying out loud. But you change, you get older, you evolve, you realize different things have different value. And that's one of the things that has had a lot of value for me is getting on my air runner and doing some more running. So you definitely have to make a conscious effort. It's not, sometimes I'll get to the end of the day and I actually won't be at 10,000. If I've missed any of those walks, especially the early walk where maybe I didn't have time to do a full 2,000 steps, I'll get to the end of the day and I might be like right around the 10K mark. Now what sets my average much higher is my weekends tend to be, if I'm doing yard work, I'm doing 20,000 steps on the weekend. So that sends my average up. But there are definitely days where it is a little bit harder if I haven't made time for it, or it's raining or whatever the case may be, that I'll get towards the end of the day and I'll have to do a little bit of extra work even before I go to bed just to hit those numbers.
Okay, I want to talk about that because you hit on the most important thing, which is the average was higher.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you say to the person who is like, got to go to bed, all of a sudden, oh, my step counter says I'm a little below. And you hear these like extreme stories about people who get like, they start going up and down stairs to hit milestones on these tracking things. For me personally, I would probably tell the majority of my clients, hey, as long as your average is higher, you can make up for it on other days. It's kind of like calories, right?
Yeah.
I might be a little leery of saying to someone, hey, you got to make sure you hit this threshold right before bed, especially as you're trying to ramp down nervous system activation. Now, thoughts on that? Because that's
same. Yeah. I mean, you're measuring in the minor. I think if you're at 9,800 steps and it's right before bed, again, is it 200 steps going to make a difference? This is the same thing with training. It's like a subtle thing. If you miss one set or you miss one day or you eat a bad meal? Like, is it going to make a difference? Like in the scheme of things, if you're being consistent elsewhere, probably not. So I would agree with you, especially if if they have any issues sleeping. I personally don't have any issues sleeping. So I could do, 500 steps before I go to bed and then get right into bed and be in sleep in 15 minutes, no problem. So, again, it's very individual. I think that for me, it's more of just kind of a mental thing at this stage to hit those numbers pretty consistently. But for clients, if you're consistent and you're hitting those numbers pretty closely on a day-to-day basis, then yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
Good.
Mm.
Let's circle back to the strength training, the full body strength training.
Mhm.
Let's say you've got someone who can do 2 days. Okay.
Mhm.
What does that look like? Let's break it down a little bit in terms of the type of exercise you want and the flexibility within your exercise selection.
So 2 days, it's funny. 2 days programming, 2 days is a significant task. It's harder to do because you have to be very succinct with what you choose, exercise selection. The thing that's probably a little different for me than maybe most coaches listening is that I work with my training subscriptions are delivered to the masses. So, get about 1,000 people that are using my training subscription. I do have a 2 times per week training subscription that's within my all access. And, with that said, when you're programming for a group of people as opposed to one individual, then obviously you don't have as much freedom to dictate what that individual needs. We're trying to do greatest good for greatest number. So for 2 days a week, it's got to be pretty succinct in terms of exercise selection. You can't waste any time with any fluff. Everything really needs to be on point if you've only got 2 days a week. Now, for that individual, they need to be on point by putting the effort in, right? Like they can't be doing 5 reps in reserve. They need to be RIR of like 1 to 2 reps consistently on their accessory based exercises. Otherwise, again, the question is are they going to get enough from it? I find that people that are on my 2-day a week get great results. I actually probably get just as many testimonials from my 2-day a week as I do from other programs, which is always surprising to me. But I think that a lot of people are coming from just programs that are very haphazard in nature. And, regardless of how many days it is, a lot of the programs that are out there are not very good. So when they start getting on a program that has all the fundamentals optimized, like exercise selection, exercise order, obviously sets, reps, and rest intervals. And of course, if you're on a 2-day week plan, then maybe you're not doing any conditioning. Maybe the only thing you're doing outside of the gym is just getting your steps, which for some is perfectly fine. But I think that the question always is, what is the best for that person? If 2 days a week is all they have, then obviously that's what we have to work with. So we have to be very, very succinct with the exercise selection. Now I do heavy work and speed work for all of my programs. So all of my programs are going to always have more of it's a functional conjugate model where we do heavy training, we do speed training, dynamic effort, we do explosive strength work. I think speed training is important for everyone. I think that as we age, we lose type 2 muscle fibers. People lose the ability to recruit higher threshold learning just by virtue of the loss of type 2 muscle fibers, our fast twitch fibers. So I think keeping some of that is important. Now, I also think that psychologically it's important because it allows people to feel athletic. So it's empowering. People are doing different types of training. They're not just lifting heavy all the time. So it gives people a break from the typical, building to a 5-rep match or whatever the case may be, and gives them a change of pace. So there is some buy-in as far as just the psychological aspect of, hey, we're going to actually move fast today, be athletic, and work on just moving as fast as we can through range of motion with great technique, and not worry so much about the weight on the bar. We're kind of just remove our ego and just work on being explosive. So that's something that is an aspect of all my programs. And then, of course, like I said, the accessory piece, our foundational movement pattern strength, you got to push those exercises. I work with people that have no problem pushing. But I know that as a whole out there, trainers work with people that they'll think that it's a 10 RM, but it's like a 20 RM, which is 2 very different things.
What about tactics within the programming that can allow people to be more efficient? So I think a good example is you get someone who sets up in a barbell squat or a barbell hip thrust in particular is going to be a lot of work for setup. But then you get that person and they hop into a pendulum squat or glute drive. Now, there's the opposite problem is that if your gym even has these things at all, there's no chance it has more than one, and someone else might be using it. So, thoughts on versatility and skills, and then choosing, say, free weight exercises versus machines to manage time setup and even fatigue, I suppose?
Yeah. So it really depends on where they're training. I have half of my people that train in a commercial gym, and then the other half, at least from the surveys that we have, half are training in a home gym. Home gym, you've got a lot of strategies at your disposal. You can use pairings, you can use giant sets, you can use even circuits if you know you wanted to build more GPPs. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat from a home gym because you're not sharing equipment. And you know, one strategy that I have leaned on is pairing up exercises, doing push pull, and I do with full body. We do more, you know, posterior, anterior. So think of something like an RDL and a pressing pattern supersetted together. Of course, you know, a lot of times if we're doing, you know, a heavy session, there's typically a main lift. So we're going to do a main lift. Maybe it's a squat pattern. And that's going to be done in isolation. It's going to be its own exercise. And, you know, in the commercial space, really the trickiest part is that you are sharing equipment, and it's tough to do supersets. It's tough to do mixed modality conditioning pieces because you've got a space that's being shared by other people. And of course, maybe they only have a sled or one set of battle ropes. So all those things need to be taken into account. But I think, you know, the easiest strategy to use for full body training is just hitting your foundational movement patterns, hitting a squat or single leg, a hinge variation, then going into a press and an upper pull. And then, you know, you can dictate what you need based on your individual needs. If you wanted to do more direct arm or glute work, that's stuff that you could fit in more towards the end. If you wanted to fit in some more abdominal work, you could fit that in towards the end and have it play out pretty well, where you're just doing one exercise at a time as opposed to trying to pair things up, which I mean, I've trained at a commercial gym a better part of my life, and I don't see those being viable strategies for a commercial gym space. You know, so again, those things certainly should be taken into consideration. I think that's one of the challenges we've had on my training for the masses is that you get 50% of the people that train at commercial gym, 50% of the people train at home. And, you know, again, they're kind of like two very different animals.
And with my group-based program, I have a gym version and a home version and a lot of substitutions built in. And
Yeah.
you said something I think is really relevant too, and still training in commercial gyms because I love it, even though I have a well-equipped home gym and I use it a bit more now. I think having the experience of being in a commercial gym on the coaching side keeps you in tune with creating good programs that are just practical for people. You can get very theoretical and optimize, what have you, but then the person gets in the gym is like, this doesn't work in the environment I'm in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always a tough thing, especially with online training. Online training is almost its own form of training because you have to consider so many different elements that you wouldn't normally consider. If I was working with you, Andrew, you're my one-on-one client, I'm working with you, you're like, all right, I'm training here. This is what my goals are. Here's my metrics, or here's our assessments. Okay, boom, we just reverse engineer on that. Easy. You have a group of people, then it's not as easy. I don't necessarily know all these things or have all this information at my disposal. So when I started off online, Andrew, I wrote programs for CrossFit gyms. This is back in like 2015, 2016. I did that, you know, all the way up to COVID. And what I learned working with CrossFit gyms, I got some really invaluable lessons. And one of which was that you have to consider so many logistical pieces that you wouldn't consider with, you know, again, you'd have that information ahead of time. So you have to make some concessions based on like, how is this going to play out in a circumstance where maybe there isn't a specific, like I'd love everyone to have a pendulum squat or a belt squat or a reverse hyper, but that's not the case. Blue hammer is like everyone to have that, but it's not the case. So you do have to kind of build that into the program. Even if someone can't do something like a superset, you build that in. Hey, if you can't do supersets, then make sure you're following the same scheme. Rest a little bit longer, maybe increase your rest interval from 60 seconds up to 90 seconds or 2 minutes, depending on the RIR, and, have those features built in. But you do have to be a little bit more general as opposed to being more specific, where I know someone's equipment, I know someone's training age, I know their injury history, all that stuff. And that's why, one-on-one coaching is, if someone wants to get to the shortest amount of time to reach their goals, working one-on-one with the coach is the best way to do it. That's why it is significantly more expensive. People see my training at, $40 a month. They're like, they expect to get one-on-one at a $40 a month rate. It's like, that's not how it works. You want to work with me one-on-one, it's going to be, significantly more expensive. But we're going to pinpoint these things. We're going to get you to where you want to go in the fastest possible way. And we're going to figure out exactly what is the right fit for you to get you there. And for the right fit for you might not be the right fit for the group of people.
We'll swing back to the cardio stuff again. Is zone 2 cardio essential for muscle growth and for strength development, or perhaps maybe better, how does it help with those?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of people talking about this. I actually just saw a post recently where someone was saying like zone 2 is not the best way to change your body. And I would agree, but zone 2 is not the best way to change your body. Zone 2 is the best way to build the underlying support systems to build muscle. So it's not directly, it's not, all right, if I do zone 2, I'm going to get leaner. If you do zone 2, you're going to enhance blood flow and oxygen delivery to working tissues. If you do zone 2, you're going to speed up recovery in the session and outside of the sessions. So when you're in the session, you're, doing your heavy squat, you're going to be able to recover between those sets much faster. It also improves things like mitochondrial density. It improves the efficiency of mitochondria and adds a new one. Everyone knows what mitochondria is, the powerhouse of the cell, right? So we need more of those. We know that people that live longer, that have higher VO2 maxes, have a reduction in inflammation as opposed to the normal person. So that's an aspect of it as well. I think that, some other things as far as, just as we mentioned early on, shifting the nervous system dominance. If someone is living in fight or flight and they're doing all fight or flight training, which a lot of people do because they think that's the fastest way to get them to where they want to go, they would be better off trying to maybe shift some more of that dominance, reduce the amount of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and of course, have this kind of cascade of effects where they're able to recover between sessions. They're not as wired. Their sleep is better. I mean, we even go down like the ability to improve their sleep quality by shifting their nervous system dominance is a very likely feature of doing zone 2 cardio. So someone says, well, it's not the best way to gain lean tissue. I would agree with them. But if we're going to just break down the physiology here, there's so many pieces of this puzzle. We can get even more granular, like lactate threshold and lactate, just in obviously the acidity of skeletal muscle. We can have that stuff accumulate, take higher levels of intensity for those byproducts to accumulate. And when that happens, we have better work capacity. We're doing more work with less toll on the body, less acidity of skeletal muscles. So there's just so many different, like I could go on and we could do a whole podcast about zone 2, the benefits of it. And, I might even miss some because there's so many of them, but trying to say like, all right, if that's your strategy to get leaner, probably not the best strategy. Some people, it might be the best strategy right now for them. And then over time, they, increase the amount of resistance training sessions they're doing to support their goals. But you cannot build a house without a foundation, and zone 2 is the foundation.
I know I had Dr. Alyssa Olenek, who we were all hanging out together at last year's Real Approach Summit. She's amazing. And so we had an episode recently, and I'm going to look, she's incredible. I'm going to look up the number for everybody. And we actually went really heavy into zone 2 cardio and, the concurrent training of both strength training and conditioning. So that is episode number, forgive me guys, 320. It's one of the newest of the new format, or so the first of the new format. Yeah. So zone 2 cardio, hybrid training, VO2 max, and longevity. There's a lot of stuff there. And I know with the episode coming up with Joel, we're going to talk a fair bit about especially on longevity and how to incorporate strength training and conditioning there. So I'm trying to make these episodes very topic based, so that way I have these great resources. There's always going to be great overlap here. So everybody listening, enjoy this stuff. Go back to the Alyssa one, wait for the Joel one. Okay. Okay. So let's see.
So there's a lot of things with that. And I think that, social media is so polarizing. And the post I saw, Andrew, was like, it had so much engagement. And I made the mistake of engaging with it because it's polarized. Like, hey, everyone's talking about how great zone 2 is right now. And then you have people that are like, well, if I shit on zone 2, I'm going to get more engagement, and that's kind of unfortunately, that's how things are. I wish they weren't that way, but that's how they are right now. If you shit on something, you're going to get more engagement, but they're oftentimes shitting on things for the wrong reason. And I think that, if you're saying like zone 2 is not going to get you to where you want to go, body composition, sprint, this individual said sprint, again, two very different things, and sprinting's not a great fit for, I would say there is less people that are a good fit for sprinting as opposed to how many people are a good fit for zone 2. Sprinting is, again, it's not something I would just throw out there to the masses, but, people love to they throw a couple studies up and it's like, oh, this study said this. It's like, well, there's a lot more to everything than a study. And that's, part of the reason I'm doing a PhD is because a lot of the stuff I already know, I've already proven, I've already seen in the trenches. But being able to look at this stuff from with an objective lens and say studies are not the end all. I already know they're not, and I'm doing this to poke more holes in this stuff and to say like, hey, there's a lot more here than just a study. Whatever the study is saying, there's a lot more to unpack.
Well, it just goes back to what you said at first, like 8 out of the 10 people who are already too sympathetic, and you throw a whole bunch of sprinting at them, it's probably too high intensity relative to, where they need to be. And
Right.
there's also the load management of this. And yes, if you can learn the skill and gradually ramp up your volume intensity of something like sprinting, great. But if someone just goes straight into it too much too fast, especially if they're deconditioned on that skill and they're a little bit older, you get guys at our age range who haven't done it in a while. What happens? I remember this, you go back and once a year at the old company, we would go play the softball tournament, each summer, right? And what are you doing? Guys like us, we're not half-assing it. We're going all out and
Right.
haven't been sprinting at all. And all of a sudden you hit, if you crack them over the wall, great. That's the best thing, right? But you're hitting hard singles, and you're sprinting to the bases, or a hard double, and then you're just going all out or chasing fly balls out in the outfield. And guess what? By the end of the day, playing 4 games, plus you're in the sun, and God forbid you're having a couple of beers, you're dehydrated. And guess what? My hamstrings feel horrendous for a while afterwards, right? And we've all done that. It's even the person who jumps in and playing pickleball, which I think, by the way, is fantastic. But if they're going all out because they're used to that kind of intensity, but you haven't built up the exposure to your tissues, your Achilles, etc., then you're asking for probably trouble. So.
And this is the advice that's being given on social media. I mean, people are going to do sprinting because that person said do sprinting, and they're not set up for it. I mean, I commented on, but I didn't even say anything. And I don't usually comment on stuff on social media because there's so much dumb shit. But, the thing is like people are going to do that, and it's no different than that softball game. You're playing the softball game and you're going to go all out, and you think that you're going to actually put yourself in an advantage because you're doing something that's going to lend itself towards your goals. And in turn, you end up getting hurt, and then you're further away from your goals. Now I can't even train. So if now you can't even train, now it's like, okay, well, what happens when people can't train? Well, they go back to their old habits. They start eating poorly. They stop, doing the reinforcing the good habits, the TDE, getting their steps. And it's just this kind of like perfect storm. And I think that people would be much better off if we just did a little bit of zone 2, a little bit of foundational strength work, hit your squat, hit your foundational movement pattern. It's very simple, easy, doesn't have to be complex. Let's start there and let's build a foundation. And over time, you might get access to some bigger things, some bigger patterns, maybe some bigger methods. But at the end of the day, people just need to do the basic stuff and do it very well.
I saw another social media post that, and I think the person behind it, I won't name them, but I think a fair bit of this guy's stuff is actually quite good. But he did say that his theory was that because lifters already have a pretty decent VO2 max, and there's some people, yeah, you know where I'm going with this, and because VO2 max probably isn't as trainable as people think, at least on a short-term, more acute basis, and I think he was like seeing everything through the lens of VO2 max being the only thing that matters for longevity, which I think is a gross oversimplification. His logic was that people who are already doing a lot of lifting don't need to do any cardio. What do you think's wrong with that thought?
I don't think it's a whole lot different than the other one I just mentioned, saying sprinting is a better fit. I think it's not good information because it lacks context. Someone's VO2 max might be just genetically, they might have a high VO2 max. Maybe their training history. I don't know what that particular study was. I know he was referring to a particular study, and I know that I didn't look at it or know anything more than that. But we have to also look at the individuals that are in that study. How many of them is there? If their VO2 max is 48, does that mean that they don't have to do any cardio? Well, I think at the end of the day, I don't care who you are. There are things that we get from cardio that we don't get from strength training, and vice versa. So negating one for the other, I don't think is a good long-term strategy for anyone, because life changes, we change, our environment changes, our physiology changes, our metrics, our resting heart rate might go up based on the circumstance. It might go up just based on deconditioning. Who knows? There's again, a myriad of things that we could potentially pull from. But I think just for overall health, doing cardio I don't know anyone that's going to debate that. If you go through the list of benefits, they're there. If you are doing a small amount and maybe your number one goal is strength and hypertrophy, you can still get a lot. And I would say that you're getting more. I'm doing a dissertation on concurrent training, so I'm going to have actual data for you in a couple of years on this. But the ability to still arrive at maximal strength gains, if that's your goal, to gain lean tissue, if that's your goal, can be done in conjunction with cardio. And there is a number of things that are responsible whether or not it goes the way you want it to go. If you're doing the training on the same day, that's a different story. And studying research has pointed to that. We know that. If you're doing an aerobic piece and then doing a heavy leg session, I mean, obviously there's going to be a amount of fatigue that's already in place before you're doing that session, whether it be maximal strength or speed strength or what have you. So there's a number of different variables to consider. I think for health of our society, doing some cardio every week is important. Making time for it. And I think that people don't make time for it because they're like, I only have 3 days. I have to do 3 resistance sessions. Well, you actually would probably get more from the resistance if you just did 2 sessions than 1 cardio session. So make time for it. Don't make it optional. Do it. And then test 3 tests. See how it works. Test your HRV on a daily basis. Test your resting heart rate. Get a Garmin watch that has that information built in. So you know if it's going up or down. If it's going down, your resting heart rate's going down. That's a great thing. That means you're going to be able to tolerate stress better. That means you're going to potentially live longer. That means physiologically, you're going to have better stroke volume and cardiac output. That means you're going to have the better ability to deliver nutrients to working tissues. I mean, again, like the list is just so long that it could be its own show, which, I'm sure Joel will get into that, but the benefits are so long. I don't know how you can make a case the other way, unless, of course, even for someone that wants performance, I think it's still a vital aspect. And, it's funny, Andrew, Louis Simmons has been talking about this stuff. He was talking about the GPP for forever, but people never made the connection with like zone 2. Well, dragging a sled for 2 miles, that's in zone 2 a lot of times with a light sled drag. I mean, you're in the 60 to 70% range. The blood pressure is relatively low. It's not any isometric contraction. So it has a lot of the same effects as doing cardio on a treadmill. But people didn't make that connection. And Louis knew, he was talking about this stuff before anyone, that your work capacity, your ability to have good conditioning was closely related to your ability to move heavy loads and be powerful. So I think that, those connections might not have been, as transparent as they are now, but I saw a lot of Louis stuff like back in the day. My initial exposure training was through the conjugate method. And we were talking about conditioning, dragging sleds for long durations for as long as I've been training, 20 plus years, 25 years.
Quick note for anybody, you've said GPP twice, general physical preparedness, just in case anybody's not sure. There's something underlying, and you mentioned something earlier, and I want to bring this to the forefront. We tend to think of things in terms of a stimulus that we can adapt to, okay? Mm-hmm. So a resistance training, we want it to be adaptive and with conditioning. But it's not the only thing that matters. It's really important. But in the case of the cardio, and this argument about, well, if lifters are doing, a certain amount of lifting and blah, 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 and through the narrow lens of VO2 max, right? And longevity, which is too narrow, then yes, maybe there's an argument that zone 2 cardio is not adaptive on that particular thing. But think about this adaptive thing for a second. So if you take a person who is completely sedentary, you alluded to this, who's probably very overweight, and then they start doing a little bit of walking, that is extraordinarily adaptive. That's going to have hypertrophic stimulus. That's actually going to go way outside zone 2 for them. They've got to have to build the capacity. But then there is going to be a point where someone who is, certain level of VO2 max, certain level of fitness, zone 2 cardio is not going to be, aggressively adaptive. But it does not mean that it doesn't have other benefits, right? I mean, the mental health benefit of resistance training and cardio. And again, I'm not a big advocate of a lot of resistance training and volume that is sub-adaptive. But here's an argument I've always had too, that, I like spending more time in the gym. It's sort of meditative. It's like time for me. And while I'm not trying to do anything that wastes my time, at the same time, there's some stuff in there that, because I'll add in extra stuff, maybe it's a little bit extra arm volume stuff I can recover from. And is everything I'm doing in the gym equal in terms of like its adaptive value? It's like once you go past this like optimal point on a bell curve of the ideal stimulus to fatigue ratio, but you keep doing more, there's diminishing returns on the stimulus, 100%, but it's not net negative. Well, if you can recover from it, but there are other benefits. So the point is we can't look at our individual experience of our training, either strength training or cardio, as just solely through the lens of what is optimally adaptive to some sort of like goal that people always talk about. It is like, how is it benefiting you? And even just nervous system regulation. That doesn't necessarily show up on the adaptive curve for zone 2 cardio, but it's still a very powerful thing, mitochondrial density. So there's a lot more here. Let's make sure everybody knows where to find you. So everybody can follow you on Instagram. I know that's been growing at Jason Brown.
No, it hasn't.
Not
My
recently.
My Instagram hasn't grown in like a year, I think.
So it's
I've
spiked,
kind
but
of,
then it's slowed. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is, like I told you before, it's I kind of got to a place where it's just I'm not willing to do the stuff that I know I probably should do. That if I want to truly grow, if my goal is to grow, then there's certain things I should do, but I'm kind of just not willing to do it. So that's kind of
Okay.
I've come to this fork in the road with it. But one other thing I want to mention, Andrew, is that people think heart rate is the only proxy for conditioning. And let's say you're doing your strength training, you're tracking your heart rate, you're like, oh, I'm in zone 2 the whole time. So it's zone 2. Heart rate's not a great proxy for conditioning because there are other elements too. There's blood pressure. When you have an isometric contraction, you will increase blood pressure. When you increase blood pressure, you reduce venous return, so blood back to the heart. And this has a number of effects, and particularly with left ventricular compliance and more stretching, more cavity volume that we tend to get. So the adaptations in the heart are very different with a heart rate of 140 on an air bike or a treadmill, as opposed to a heart rate of 140 doing high rep squats. They're two different things. You're not going to get the same effects. And, Joel had a great picture in his book of an ultrasound of the heart, and it was one that had more cavity volume, more endurance from, more endurance athletes that have the adaptation specifically in the left ventricle. They get more cavity volume as opposed to a weightlifter, which gets more thickening. Yes, exactly. More thickening. And that's, again, really two different things. If you use heart rate as the only proxy, you're like, well, heart rate is heart rate. And that's why people always said for years, just lift weights faster. And they don't understand that physiologically, if you drive blood pressure up, then you do have a reduction of the things that we're looking to get. And, sustaining, like if you were to swing a kettlebell, are you going to swing it for 30 or 40 minutes straight? Probably not. It's not a sustainable thing. You can swing a kettlebell for probably longer durations if you have the right load, but upwards of a few minutes straight is very, very hard to do. So it needs to be more sustainable. It needs to keep blood pressure low. And of course, the heart rate piece, if the heart rate is too high, then you do blunt some of those adaptations. So we need to stay in the proper range. So know that heart rate is not always the best indicator of whether or not it's being done correctly. It has to be done in a way that keeps blood pressure low and is more sustainable in nature.
Just very tactically, if someone wants to actually have, and you don't need to have the exact movement pattern of the kettlebell swing, but if you want to do higher rep, sustainable that motion, go to a ski erg if you have access to one. It's virtually it's similar enough. So for the audio people, I held up a copy of Joel's book, Ultimate MMA Conditioning. It's so much more than just MMA stuff. This thing is still a classic. So guys, I can't recommend enough. I'll have Joel on soon.
Phenomenal.
Okay. So you're not excited about your Instagram, but your YouTube is getting great. So what other resources do you have? YouTube, and what else you got? And your book.
Yeah. My book is on Amazon. It's lower body training. And it's a great resource. There's a lot of unconventional stuff in there. A lot of stuff that I learned from the conjugate system and Louis Simmons. As far as training your lower body and doing it in a lot of different ways. Even, there's multiple qualities of fitness. So you've got maximal strength, submaximal strength, explosive strength, speed strength, repeated effort method where you're working more rehabilitative strength, prehabilitative. So there's a lot of information in that book. It's about 70,000 words in that book. And I wrote that book before there was ChatGPT. So it was I had to do the work. Unlike today, So it's a great resource. My YouTube channel is a great resource. Instagram, I feel like at some point I'm going to crack the code, but But yeah, it's still, there's still a lot of great information there that I'm proud to put out. And like my audiences are people that, like, if I say following your coach, you'll get like 1,000 new followers. They're people that are real people and not bots, and people that know the value of education, getting solid education. So I do have a lot of trainers and coaches that follow me. And I'm actually launching a new course very soon here. So if you're not on my mailing list, there's a plenty of places to go on my website and get on my mailing list. We've got a course coming out, which actually Joel is a part of in a small way. So I'm excited to again, continue educating trainers and coaches and helping them write better programs, concurrent programs, so they can, again, start putting sense, because I think that there's just a big disconnect between the strength and conditioning world. And my goal is to bring those closer together. And that's, a lot of the work I'm doing in my dissertation is about that very thing, and knowing that we can get a lot from both ends of the spectrum, and we can have those two coexist and really, again, drive people in the right direction long term, not just transformation in 90 days. I want long term. I know you're like me, you want clients for life. I want people training with me for life. And the way we do that is we've got to be mindful of the things that truly matter.
Love what you're doing, man. I'm grateful that you came on. So, Jason, appreciate you. Everybody listening, please go follow what Jason's doing, dig into his resources, and, especially for the coaches, there's a ton of stuff there for you, but even the enthusiasts, there's going to be a lot you're going to learn about, how to build your programs, a lot of stuff about Zone 2, et cetera. There's just so much more depth to what we got a chance to talk about here. I'll be bringing you back in the not too distant future. So thank you, brother.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll see you this summer. I'm looking forward to it.
That's right. And again, if anybody wants to go and hang out with us at CanFit Pro, message me. I can't remember the dates off the top of my head. I know it's in the middle of August.
I think it's the 13th and 14th.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then you'll be doing something with Luca. So Luca Hocevar will be there. I know Lee Boyce will be speaking at it as well. This should be a great lineup. So hopefully we'll see you guys there.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks again.